First, though, U.S. prosecutors are investigating Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell over his congressional testimony in June. He testified under oath to the Senate Banking Committee. Jay Powell is calling it political intimidation linked to the president wanting lower rates and warning that it is threatening the Federal Reserve's independence. Watch this.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
Joining me now is U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency Director and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac Chairman William Pulte. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much
Always
for
good
being
to see you,
here.
Maria.
A lot of people are questioning this. Why is Trump's DOJ investigating Chairman Powell? Is this all politics?
That's outside. This whole thing is outside of my purview, Maria, so I'd refer you to the DOJ on that matter.
Yeah, but you've been talking down to Jay Powell since you got in the job. You said that you were looking at investigating the way he conducted himself anyway, so you know more about this than you're letting on.
Well, my main focus, Maria, frankly, is focused on mortgage rates and making sure that we get home buying and home building back in this country. For the last 4 years under Joe Biden, inflation went through the roof. Mortgage rates went up. Interest rates went up, decimated the economy. President Trump has brought the economy back. The economy is on fire. The economy, I feel very optimistic about, not just the economy, but also the housing market. We saw mortgage rates go down the other day on the $200 billion buy that we're in the process of executing upon, and I feel very optimistic about where things are headed.
Well, I mean, this is a great point, and the president is taking on some things that could have a serious impact on consumers in a positive way. Mortgage rates already now at 3-year lows as the president is trying to make homes more affordable. The 30-year fixed rate sitting at 6.16% as the president called for Fannie and Freddie to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds. He wrote this on Truth Social: "Because I chose not to sell Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in my first term, a truly great decision, and against the advice of the so-called experts, it is now worth many times that amount, an absolute fortune, and has $200 billion in cash. I'm instructing my representatives to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds. This will drive mortgage rates down, monthly payments down, and make the cost of owning a home more affordable." Now, Director, you said on Friday you've already put in a $3 billion buy already, but I want to read you something that Cowen is telling clients this week. They say, look, we see this succeeding in the short term, though we believe it will reignite home price inflation given the supply constraints over the long term. Your reaction?
Well, we're working on both things. We're working on not just making it a more affordable market with mortgage rates and down payments and some other things which, we'll be looking at, but also on the supply end of things. We met with home builders recently. We're meeting again with the home builders this week. I'm very confident that the builders will get building again. Remember, no other president until President Trump showed up on the scene even knew that Fannie and Freddie existed. People tried to get the president to sell this company, these two companies, if you can believe it, for $100 billion. And we're just in the process of doing a $200 billion buy. We have over $200 billion in cash or cash equivalents at the two companies. I mean, it's crazy, almost criminal that other presidents didn't even know that these companies existed or used them. So we have a president, finally we have a president, President Trump, the greatest president, the president who has the best instincts, saying we're going to use this $200 billion, we're going to make housing more affordable, and we're going to do everything we can as an administration to reverse what's happened these last 4 years.
So how significant a move do you think you can actually lead here in terms of the impact on rates? How significant a move are you expecting? Lower?
Well, obviously anything can change, but we've already seen a quarter-point reduction in mortgage rates. People saw a 5 handle for the first time. There were prints the other day as low as 5.6 and 5.7% on people offering mortgages, and then 5.8 and then close to 5.9. So look, this is a very exciting time, what's going on with the mortgage bond market, and I'm very confident that not only will the teams at Fannie and Freddie execute, but also stay tuned for the president's speech in 2 weeks at Davos. I think you'll be very excited about some of the stuff he announces with housing and probably some other stuff.
All right. Well, look, I want to get your take on what we just read, though, the president's post on Truth Social, because some people saw that as the president basically reminding everybody that his decision was the right one in the first term. Maybe doing an IPO of Fannie and Freddie now is off the table. Here's what one analyst writes.
No, that's nonsense. President Trump keeps all options on the table all the time. It's totally up to the president to decide what he wants to do. The IPO actually may be strengthened by the bond buys because it will actually increase earnings, and we feel very comfortable that we still have a safe and sound Fannie and Freddie. Actually, one could argue we're actually making it safer and sounder by this bond purchase. So the IPO is still very much on the table. That's entirely up to President Trump. But right now, our main focus, and it has been, as you saw, he announced a ban on institutional home buying. That is huge, Maria. Absolutely huge. People across the country are so happy with that. Then you combine it with the mortgage stuff that we're doing. It's a 1-2 punch, and I think we're going to lay out other very exciting things to hopefully reverse what's gone on these last 4 Biden disastrous years.
What about the president banning large institutional investors from acquiring single-family homes? He made a good point. He said, look, institutions don't move into single-family homes. Families move into single-family homes. What is that going to do to the market, stopping the Blackstones of the world of acquiring single-family homes?
Well, you look at it like Pocahontas and all these other fake politicians. They all talk and they're no action. They've never spent a day in their private life, in their private sector. President Trump made a bunch of money, understands real estate, understands how to get things done. He looks at this thing. He says, we're not going to complain about it. We're going to get something done. He puts out the truth. I'm very confident that this will get done. You'll see executive action from him, and then shortly after that, he'll codify it with Congress. I think this is going to be a big win for the American people. You know, Maria, one of the things people don't understand is that some of the home builders are selling property, selling homes, if you can believe this, to corporations at 20, 30, in some cases 40% off what they're selling to American people. This can't happen. We need people in shelter. We need people in homes, just like they were in President Trump's first term. People should live in homes. They shouldn't be on corporate balance sheets.
What would be your expectation for the 30-year mortgage by year end? I mean, are these moves going to push it down as low as 5% by the end of the year? Is that in the cards?
Well, we already had a 5 handle the other day, but obviously the market can go up and down. Look, what we're trying to do is everything within our tool set. As I said, no other president knew that Fannie and Freddie existed, and certainly no other president knew how to utilize these 2 assets. I mean, President Trump, they tried to convince him to sell it for $100 billion. Now the thing's probably worth $500 billion to $1 trillion, some say. So we are using all of our tools in our tool chest. Fannie and Freddie are no longer forgotten businesses. They are back, bigger, stronger than ever before, and we're going to use them as tools to make sure that Americans can get in homes. You know, Maria, we oversee $9 trillion at Fannie and Freddie. $9 trillion.
It's unbelievable.
That's like the second biggest asset class compared to U.S. Treasuries.
Yeah.
How are these things so ignored by other presidents? It's quite crazy.
Well, that's why you have a businessman in the White House, and he understands all of this. But look, that post did not sound like a president in a rush to IPO those companies. When would you expect that to happen?
Well, I disagree with your characterization. We keep all options on the table at all times. We are ready to go to execute upon whatever the president asks of us, but it's up to the president. I expect he'll probably make a decision in the next month or 2. But again, the president is unpredictable. That's why people love him. So we'll see what happens. It's up to the president.
William, President Trump is also calling for a 1-year cap on credit card interest rates at 10%. Here he is. Watch.
I want a cap on credit card interest rates because, you know, some of them are 28, almost 30%. And that people don't know they're paying 30%. We're putting a 1-year cap at 10%, and that's it. They know it. They've really abused the public. The credit card companies have totally abused it. I'm not going to let it happen.
Well, the president's right about that. These rates are absolutely outrageous in many cases. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reports Americans owned a staggering $1.23 trillion in credit card debt in the third quarter of 25. The president announcing a major policy shift aimed at improving housing affordability, taking these steps to ban large institutional investors from buying single-family homes, now having Fannie and Freddie buy the $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities, and now this, the capping of credit card rates. Look, Wall Street is reacting, William. They say this is well-intentioned and politically popular, but even as the president has said in the past himself, the reality is price controls like this are an affordability killer, and it will hurt the very Americans this proposal seeks to help most. Your reaction?
My reaction is that Democrats, they've scammed everybody by saying, oh, this, that, the other thing. All they do is talk. President Trump, when you give him a mission, or when he gives himself, rather, a mission, he gets it done. He's on the path to getting a lot done here. And, I mean, he's had an amazing year, and it's crazy to think it's only been 11 days. And most of them, you know, some of them haven't even been working days. And I saw something online last night about how 2026 is like the year of Trump. It is. I think he's going to get so much done this year. It's going to make people very, very happy. You've already seen it so far this year. Stay tuned for Davos for a couple more housing announcements. And it's going to be an exciting year.
Yeah,
I'm very optimistic.
William, I understand, but this morning, J.P. Morgan stock is down 3%. American Express is down sharply. All the credit card stocks are down. And the analysts are out there saying that this is going to see an impact on 2026 earnings of these credit card companies of between 25 and 250% of the credit card issuers.
Well, I would defer to President Trump on this specific policy. Obviously, I support it. He knows exactly what he's doing in this regard. People are very happy about this. People are very happy about all the affordability things. Again, it's not talk, it's action. And we have a president who's acting. If you give him an idea and it's a good idea, he takes ideas from anyone and he acts on them. And that's what we need in a commander-in-chief. And I'm just grateful as an American that we have somebody, who's in that position with somebody like President Trump.
All right. Well, you are taking on so much. The president is dealing with so much politically, economically, and geopolitically. William,
He's
good to
got
see
it.
you.
He does it with ease.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be watching. William Pulte joining us this morning. Stay with us. We'll be right back.